Hi everyone, thanks very much for the invitation to come along today. This is my first foray into the banking industry, so I've been with Bendigo and Adelaide Bank for a year as of last weekend. I found out today that a former colleague of mine from the online gambling world, Paul Moss, where are you, Mossy? Is he in the room? Yeah. Oh, there you are. So my new colleagues hate me saying this, but there's not a huge amount of difference I find between the financial services industry and the gambling world in many ways. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of my experiences around how to build great customer experiences. I've used the terminology in the title here around soft and hard experiences. I find that it provides a really good level of focus for people in my teams when they're looking at and what I mean by the soft aspects of customer experience are those aspects that relate to personalisation and anticipating the needs of customer and that type of thing. And with the hard experiences, it's really just how difficult or easy you make that experience for customers when they're trying to do business with you. And they are quite different approaches. So when I was about to start preparing my slides for the session today, I asked my youngest son, Mackenzie, what should I talk about? And he said to talk about animals. Clearly I can't do that, but I do have some animal analogies that I'm going to try and work into a few case studies to give you a bit of an insight into how I approach innovation with a view to incubation. I'll come on to talk about what I mean by that in just a little while. So to start with, I've got 4 topics I want to talk through today. The first of them is around disruption, and the subtext there is around seeking opportunity from danger. Is the first animal slide. So some of you in the room, or many of you in the room, may have heard this story / joke of 2 guys out camping in Yellowstone National Park. They come out of the river from having a swim and they encounter a grizzly bear. And the bear starts ambling towards them, starts moving a bit faster, and one of the guys just bolts. And his mate steps out of the water onto the shore and crouches down to put his shoes on. And the mate who's running turns back and says, "What are you doing? You're never going to outrun a bear." And he said, "Well, I don't have to outrun the bear, I only have to outrun you." So when I tell that story in a retail environment, the bear is Amazon. Yeah. So the message is that if you're fit enough and you're fast enough, there should be opportunity for you coming out of the disruptors. And with my limited experience in the financial services sector, I'd say that that same sort of story really applies to the disruption that's coming in the payments sector and financial services more generally. I should have added at the start, I'm happy to take questions on the way through here because the topics I'm going to cover are quite different. We've only got sort of 15 minutes, but very, very happy to take questions on the way through. I've just been asked if you can put your hand up. There's a mic at the back, and if anyone wants to chime in with a question or a comment about anything I've got to say or challenge anything I've got to say, please feel free to jump in. So nothing on that point. Okay, so in terms of timing, I'm just going to set my own timer here so I don't run over. This is a question of how we go about working out when we should go all in or when we should just take a more passive approach. So, do we want to be the early bird who catches the worm, or is it a case of the second mouse who gets the cheese? It will be different depending on the initiative or opportunity that you're trying to take advantage of. But again, in my experience, more often than not, the wisest approach is to hold back to some extent until you have a degree of confidence about the outcome that you're going to achieve and the business benefits that you're going to achieve by taking a particular course of action. What's really important around this is that you also bring your people with you. Some of the most common causes of failure that I've seen in terms of digital initiatives or innovation more generally are letting technology move too quickly in front of the capabilities of your people. You have to bring your people with you, otherwise it can actually have a detrimental impact, particularly on on morale. So what do I mean by, if I go back to the title of this presentation around from innovation to incubation, and again, if I draw on my experience with Betfair, which Paul will be able to relate to, I hope, it was a genuinely innovative, disruptive organisation. If it was invented today, it'd be the Uber of wagering. It was a peer-to-peer platform modelled on the stock exchange where punters could come and bet against each other effectively on markets that we set. That culture of innovation really pervaded the entire organisation, and it was felt from top to bottom. But what it did was encourage a culture almost of looking for the next innovation without recognising or without working sufficiently on improving what we'd already built. This is even 10 years after the exchange was developed. As I say, it was truly innovative, truly disruptive. But one of the key lessons for me was that if you do have something that is genuinely different and is genuinely loved by your customers, you've got to take time to nurture it. And that's what I mean by that concept of incubation. Any questions before I move on to the next bit? No? I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so that's fine, we'll keep going. Awareness, right? This, hopefully the animal analogy works here as well. Checking the temperature is about having awareness of your surroundings. So this is where boiled frog syndrome comes in. I've never done this, but I'm told that if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and put it on the stove and gradually heat it up, the frog will eventually go to sleep and boil. If you put drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, it'll jump straight out. That's the idea, right? So what I've seen, particularly in working with a number of boards in different industries over the last sort of 7 or 8 years or so, is that there is a real risk of suffering from what I'll call boiled frog syndrome in the corporate world. So that is sort of getting into this belief that everything's fine. Yeah. So yeah, we know that there's some noise and there's some change happening, but everything's fine. We'll be okay. So what do you need to do to try and put yourself in a position where you can be alive to the real disruption and the real change that's happening around you, and try and filter out the noise? Because there's a real difficulty, I find, in filtering out that those changes that are really going to impact a business in a negative way or present opportunities in a positive way, and the thrashing about and the buzz that you get, particularly from talk about fintechs and startups more generally. So the solution I find in that case is to really immerse yourself in the business from an operational point of view. So, and that applies for directors, executives, etc. Get in amongst the grassroots of your staff, understand the culture, understand things like how difficult it is for them to do their work, whether they're genuinely trying to improve. You can only really get across that level of detail if you get out of your office, not you, but directors, executives in particular, get out of the offices and experience what is happening on the floor. Any questions at this point? No? Right, so focus. Avoiding distractions is a key one. This is a bit similar to, I was sitting out on the bench there before, and some tourists were feeding chips to seagulls. And I don't know if any of you have been at the beach when there's a fish and chip shop or a vendor nearby, and someone throws a chip over here and all of the seagulls move over there, they throw one over there, and they all rush over here, and you're almost like an orchestra conductor at times. Again, big risk in terms of keeping focus on innovation and what's important for an organisation. There's lots of, and I'd sort of been out of this space for about 6 years before joining the bank, but as soon as I did, I just got hammered by vendors. Lots of people selling me and my team the next shiny new toy, the next must-have. It's really important that there is some sort of filter in an organisation for even engaging with those vendors. If something's not right for a business in terms of the timing, it can be incredibly distracting for teams, and particularly in marketing teams, which is where I've spent a large amount of my time. The technology can be seen as the solution without applying the right sort of thinking to the application of technology. What I want to do in terms of summing up was just emphasise some recent research that we'd had done which looked at the mix of rational and emotional drivers of customer choice in the financial services industry, and emphasise how important it is in terms of not only designing your customer experience but talking about it and recognising the impact that that can have on perceived price competitiveness. And what it's made me realise is that it's this concept of the pallet out the front of the store. So Caltex for a long time had a pallet out the front of their store because it made their customers think that, well, you're not paying for the goods to be brought inside and stacked on shelves so that I can just pick them up and take them out again. So, you know, it must be good value. So there's a real difference, I think, a real emphasis in the minds of customers in the financial services industry about differentiating between putting value on acting in the interests of customers and acting in a customer-focused way. So our research has indicated that of the non-price cues, so the factors that the way that you represent yourselves or a business represents itself out in the marketplace, the single biggest detractor in terms of perceived price competitiveness is the notion of being customer-focused, which I know certainly in an organisation like Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, it's almost counterintuitive because it's the way that we behave. But what it does in the minds of customers is say, well, hang on, I might not want all of this great stuff that you're building. I want to be able to choose what you're delivering for me, and I'll be the one who ascribes value to that, and I'll pay for it if I do value it. In many cases, even if the price doesn't change, if they believe that you are developing experiences that they might not want, it'll have a negative impact on their perception of your brand. Yeah, so what I'm doing, we're at the early stages of this journey inside the bank, but what we're doing is trying to draw a much stronger nexus between the products and features that we build and the experiences that we provide for our customers and non-customers, and how that impacts the positioning of the brand as we want it to appear. So you'll see probably over the next 3 or 4 weeks a new set of above-the-line campaigns launched for the bank, which will be much more focused on what we do and our capability as a bank. So again, that mix of rational and emotional drivers, about 75% of customer choice is driven by the rational side of things, so price and capability. We are the most trusted bank. The last survey had us number 7 out of all brands in terms of trustworthiness. We were number 3 before that. It actually doesn't matter in terms of driving customer acquisition, and so our bank is all about driving growth. So what you'll see is that we'll just get back to talking about the basics in terms of how we can deliver fantastic value to our customers. So that's all I have, but I'm happy to take some questions before we break for lunch. Mike's up the back here, if anyone... No? Okay. Great. Thanks very much, everyone.